Yiboneh, Yiboneh Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Neshama shir chadash.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back to the Yiboneh Beit Midrash. Welcome home to Torah. A warm welcome home. As we all know, we deal with the Yakar as the basis of our discussion, reminding everybody that you could find the original Hebrew sheets in the description box below on the YouTube channel, and there's a link that will take you to the Yiboneh website, and you just have to find the right parsha, the right year, and the right title, and you're good to go. We encourage you to follow along. As we know, the book, the Ir Giborim, was written by the Yakar, and that's the actual book we're using. And we always deal with fundamentals, things that are very fundamental in Judaism. It's for all levels, right? But one of the concepts is it's called a discipline. It's a discipline within Judaism called makshava, to actually have deep thought, philosophical and theological thoughts about things. It's not halacha, right? It's deeper than that. It's deeper. Sometimes the halachas come out, and we're going to see why we do what we do sometimes. So the pasuk that we're going to deal with is in Genesis chapter 28, verse 10. We know that Yaakov left Beersheba. Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheba, and he went to Haran. Vayelech Harana. Just for those biblical scholars, right? When you have the hey at the end of a place, it's the same as if you had a lamed in the beginning. The lamed before a place means you're going to a place. It's referring to a place. You're in the process of transporting yourself to a place, like the word Efrat. It's a city, but in the Bible, it's Ephrata, right? Because that's where Yaakov was going. So the lamed in the beginning is equivalent to the hey at the end, or in other words, it's one or the other. You don't need both. But don't be mistaken to think that there's it means to Haran. That's my first biblical lesson to you. Now, we're going to read a medrash. That's how he begins. He always begins with this medrash, and he will talk about it at some point. Not tonight. We're talking about a 15-page thesis, and we're only going to get through a page and a half, maybe 2 pages. That's it. So the real nuts and bolts of how this medrash fits in, he'll get to in many pages later. And I didn't get that far. So we're just going to go through the first 2 pages. So interestingly enough, if you look at Rashi, where I underlined it, it's basically a synopsis of the medrash. So the complaint that the medrash is bringing, or the question the medrash is bringing, why do you even need to know that he went out of Beersheba? Just say where he's going. He went to Haran. Why do we need to know that he left Beersheba? And the medrash basically says, listen, if you look down in source number 2, and they're going to ask the same thing about Naomi when she left Moab. What? She left? He left? You have to tell me they left? Didn't every day people come and go? Didn't you have donkey drivers? Didn't you have camel drivers that left on a daily basis from this place? What's so important that he left Beersheba? So it's very interesting. We'll read the Rashi first. Scripture had only to write Yaakov went to Haran. Why does it mention where he departed from? So this tells us that the departure of a righteous person from a place makes an impression. What kind of impression? I mean, there's different ways to look at it. First of all, he wasn't alone. There was Rivka and Yitzhak were there. But I always imagine, what do you mean make an impression? Well, you know what? Let's read the words in the Medrash first. Go to the Hebrew sheets. It says, Kol zman shat tzadik ba'ir, hu hoda'ah, hu ziva, hu hadra. The whole time its tzaddik is in a particular place. He is its splendor. He is its shine. He is its beauty. There's something about the place that has become enhanced because of that person's presence. And when he departs, as the Medrash says, Yotze misham, pana ziva, pana hoda, pana hadara. All those things leave with him. But again, you have Yitzhak and Rivka there. They're tzaddikim. How much of an impression is one person going to make if you were the only tzaddik? Okay, I get it. The Rishaim are happy to have you leave because, you're a constant reminder of, your behavior that has to change or improve. So I get it when you're the only tzaddik or maybe the biggest tzaddik. Okay. I always imagine you go to town, like, the Rechovetz Chaim walks through town, and all the flowers start to bloom as he walks by, and then as he passes, then they'll wither away again, right? Just imagine. Well, that's what I thought. Well, it's much deeper than that, of course. And I'm going to go back to the Rashi. So while the righteous man is in the city, he is its beauty, he is its splendor, and he is its majesty. When he departs from there, its beauty is departed, its splendor departed, and the majesty departed. And then it brings Rashi brings in Megillus Ruth that she went from that place, right? The idea was the Vayeitzei min hamakom asher hayasa shama. Who did she leave behind? She was the only tzedekis. Naomi was the only tzedekis. What about Ruth? Okay, Ruth did come with her, but in the beginning, she wanted to leave them behind. Ruth and her sister Orpah. So the idea is a concept that we are probably familiar with from a secular point of view or a scientific point of view, and that is the statement that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So let's just say you have 10 men, they want to make a minyan. Each individual, let's just say, is 10%. I don't like putting percentages, but let's just use simple math. 10%. But when you have 10 men together, it's 200%. There's something that each Jew is magnifying the greatness of the other. Each tzaddik is magnifying the. So when he leaves, the Medrash implies that Yitzhak and Rivka went back to being not normal people, above normal, but still the greatness that they had was because Yaakov was in their presence, because another tzaddik was in their presence. And this is what I want to say just on the side. This is why it's so important to go to Minyan. We are elevating ourselves and we're elevating others. Okay, when we join a minyan, whether it's for davening or for learning, like we have here, so many people sitting and learning. It's a big difference in learning on your own. By the way, so I looked up this statement, and according to Google, this is attributed to a person by the name of Aristotle. I'm not so sure because we have it right here. This is the source. That not only did Yaakov leave Beersheba, had to say it because of the diminishing of the greatness of the people there as well, not just the place, and also by Ruth. And they lived way before Aristotle. But basically, I'll just sum up what Aristotle does say, or what his thesis is, and that's what Judaism says, that this idea occurs because of synergy. The interaction creates new properties that wouldn't have existed had they remained separate. And that's what we're saying when we say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, now let's move on to the actual Yakar itself, and he begins by telling us some very fundamental ideas. That this world is a world full of exchanges. I remember of Noah Weinberg, Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva of Educator, had said so many times, we have 5 levels of pleasure. We were created as pleasure seekers. That's what we are. And there's 5 different levels of meaning, from an intimate relationship with God down to, from family and for causes, all the way down to even physical pleasure. But there are a constant exchange. He uses the term exchange. There's counterfeit pleasure, and then there's real, everlasting pleasure. And we're constantly faced with those choices. So it's very nice that the Yakar is probably the source for this, if not others. But basically, this world is full of exchanges. Mekabel Tamura mitov l'ra umira l'tov. We're constantly exchanging either for good or for bad, or for worse. That there are all these events and circumstances and meetings and maybe even calamities that fall upon a person and occur during the lifetime of a person. K'mo rabo ein la'adam lehisater mipneihem. And a person cannot hide from them. You're going to be faced with these choices, and they're going to come to you. And we're going to see what we're talking about specifically. I just thought of, death and taxes. They used to say you can't hide from it. It's just like it's a reality that you cannot hide from. These are things that will happen in life. And this is I think this is very interesting because this is going to be the whole thesis. That there are 4 directions. Well, we'll call it ruchos. We're going to call them directions, but it can mean wind, it can mean spirit. The purpose, the good purpose, the positive purposes of our lives, they come to a person from 4 different directions. Kulam bliti tachlis umikabel hes. Now, if you do all of them without purpose, then it's not for the good, it's for the hefsid. It's actually, could be cause a loss. And Tamura kikol hametzius shel ha'olam hazeh niklalim bedalus ruchos hashamayim. And all those different exchanges that we could do, for good or for bad, with all of existence in this world, they include what we call the 4 directions. We're in the 4th dimension. There are north, east, south, and west. That's why the Dalet of Shema Yisrael is emphasized. We're talking about knowing that God is one in this world. Dalet always rents. The number 4 always represents this world. That's why the name Yehudah, we were discussing that earlier. It's Yud Kei Vav Kei with a Dalet, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei is God's name, right? Was, is, and will be. But the Dalet represents us, the ambassadors in this world. So Yehudah is God's name with the Dalet. Got it? We are God's representative in Olam Hazeh. Okay? So the Dalet represents that. So from the 4 different directions. Shebehem hivtiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu liYaakov. Look at the source sheet in number 3, Genesis chapter 24, 28, verse 14. We're only talking about 4 verses later. God promises Yaakov, he's on his way out of Eretz Yisrael to go and find a wife. He's also running away from Esau. But God promises him, your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, which means you cannot count it, and it's all over the place, and you shall gain strength. Listen to those words. Uparatzta. You're going to spread out, but you're going to be strong. Now, in a certain sense, we're talking about galut, exile, right? At some point, maybe that's called the exchange rate for the negative. There's also a positive. You're going to gain strength westward and eastward and northward and southward. Ufaratzta yama the kedma v'tzvona v'negba. Just think about those names. Yama, why is it called? Why is west? Because the Mediterranean Sea is Yama. The Yama is the sea. So the sea is west in Eretz Yisrael. Kedma, Kedem, that's east, because the sun rises in the east. That's where everything begins on a daily basis. Tzfona also means hidden, but it means north. And Negev, Negba, has it's very dry. It is true. It's a desert, but it's in the south. Negba, Negev. Negba is south. Just keep, it's always good to think about the words. So the Yakar explains, based on that, God promised Yaakov. He said to him, you're going to gain strength in all these 4 directions. Well, guess what? This is going to be how, if we understand what it means to gain strength properly in those 4 directions, we're going to overcome and we're going to succeed in life. And he says here, what do most people chase after? Money, that's one thing. There's 4 things, and they come from different directions. And we have them in the Tanakh, that these 4 things come from these different directions. Okay, so he says like this: V'dalid ruchos elu kolalin kol hamitzias shebnei adam mityachasin achareihem. That these 4 directions, we're going to talk about directions first, that these 4 different directions include all of existence that people chase after, that people relate to, that people are concerned about. And The first one, kana, is oisher, wealth, money. If you want to just make the list now, oisher, money. Banim, children. Chachma, wisdom. And la'orech yamim, a long, let's just say, a long, healthy life. That's what people want. People are chasing. This is the guts of Olam Hazeh. And they come from the four different directions. So he uses psukim to explain. We already saw the first one. You're going to gain your strength. But we don't have those. We don't have the matchup of the four things people chase with the four directions. So he spends a little bit of time doing that. I have to say one of them isn't as clear as I would love it to be, but if we investigate, it could be that it's much clearer than we know. But at the moment, oisher. The first thing we'll deal with in Job 37:22. So the number 4 on the source sheet. It says, golden splendor comes from the north. Mitzafon zahav yeta. Now, we're going to also find out that evil comes from the north. So gold, wealth, can be used for good. As this verse, golden splendor comes from the north. On God there is an awesome glory. Now look at the Rashi, in fact. The very second part of the Rashi. Let's read the whole Rashi. Right, the north wind blows and drives away the rain, and then the sun shines. That could be simple pshat. That's what it means that the golden glory comes from the north. Where does it start? We're in the northern hemisphere. It starts in the northeast, and then it proceeds down to the south, and then it settles in the southwest. Okay? So that could be what it means. Rashi also says, what does it mean gold comes from the north? Remember I said it's safon? The good gold is hidden for those who bring themselves to the commandments of the Holy One, blessed be He, and believe in the very awesome God. So there is wealth if you're going to do the right thing, right? So that's a good side to wealth. That unfortunately can also be used in a very negative way. As we will see, there's two other, the next verse, he says, Harehu Baal Tamura. However, the master of exchange can take place. And it says in Koheles, chapter 5, verse 12, that's Ecclesiastes 5, verse 12 and number 5 in the source sheet. There's a grievous evil that I saw under the sun, riches kept by their owner for his harm. Which means like this, Oisha Shamor L'Balav L'Ra'ato. If you're not going to spend it, you're amassing the wealth because you just want to amass wealth, we're going to see that is problematic. So you're not using your wealth properly. You're not giving it away. You're not spending it on the right things. You're guarding it for yourself. In fact, he mentions like the riches of Korach. Look at Rashi, because of which he became haughty and descended into the grave. He was wealthy, and he obviously did not use his wealth purposefully for good. And he brings Yirmiyahu, chapter 1, verse 14. And the Lord said to me, from the north the misfortune will break forth. Mitzafon to pateach hara'ah. So there's also, we saw from the north, you could have good wealth, or unfortunately, evil and the Yetzer Hara and bad things can come from the north. Okay, then he discusses banim, children. Children come from the east. Okay, if you want to write this down, wealth comes from the north, children come from the east. Habayim and Mizrach. It's coming from the east, as it says in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 5. Fear not, for I am with you. From the east I will bring your seed. This is referring to Zerah, right? In the Hebrew. It says, Mi Mizrach avi Zerah. Okay, from the east I will bring your seed. This is obviously talking about the children come from the east. V'af oto ruach. Now that same direction, guess what? You also mekabel tamura. There's also an exchange rate that goes on. That is for the bad. In Yechezkel, Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 26, number 8 on the source sheet. In the abundant waters your ornaments brought you, the east wind broke for you in the heart of the seas. As I mentioned in the beginning, there was one idea that was a little difficult to plug in. This is the one. Because he brings these two verses that are a broken heart or broken seas. It broke you in the heart of the seas. Belev yamim. So I'm not really sure how that exactly plays in with children, although I have children and they break our hearts. but it could be very turbulent. The next source he brings is in Isaiah 27, verse 8, which somehow either relates to children directly or relates to the sea, because it says, I meant the east wind. It says, in that measure, when they sent them out, it strove with it. He spoke with his harsh wind on the day of the east wind. So there's something very turbulent, and perhaps it relates to children. I personally didn't see it, but the Yakar is explaining there's an exchange rate on children. And the next thing he brings down is Chachma, Hasagat Chachma. In order to reach wisdom, to grasp wisdom, wisdom happens to be called Yama, Nikrat Yama. What is Yama? Again, it means the sea, right? Ki Ma'arav Nikra Yama. The west is called the sea. Lefi Shehayam Hagadolhu B'Ma'aravo Shel Olam. That at least in the west part of Eretz Yisrael, that's where you find the sea we call the Yom HaTichon, the Mediterranean Sea. That's the big ocean from Israel. And then he brings a pasuk in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9. Okay, so we just discussed how wisdom is related to the sea. And now in Isaiah 11:9 it says, for neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mount, for the land shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as water covers the earth. Right? This is messianic, that the whole world will be aware and conscious of the one true God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like a recent president got up and said, right, President of the United States. So it says in Hebrew, Kimaleh haaretz dea et Hashem kemayim liyam mechasim, like the water that's covering the seabed, right? And so everyone will know about. So that's wisdom. Then he says, Af chachmim nekabel tomorrow. Even wisdom has its exchange for the negative. So negative. Look in Koheles, Ecclesiastes. It's actually 1 verse 18, not 8 as the page says. It says over there. It's number 11 on the source sheet. For in much wisdom is much vexation. That's called in Hebrew. It's anger, and he who increases knowledge increases pain. The Yosef das, Yosef machov. There's some type of negativity that is attributed or associated with wisdom. Thank God we don't know from it, right? Perhaps. So far, what did we have? We had wealth comes from the north. The children come from the easterly direction. We're talking about a wind, a spirit. And then wisdom comes from the west. What about oirech yamim, long life? Now, what he does, he actually ties it into wisdom, which we said is the west, but watch what he does. Third line down on the left side, al derech, darom. The word darom means south. It's a hint to a long life. Like it says in Chazal, in Baba Basra. Now, if I read it, you might get confused, because it says if you want wisdom, you face the south. And if you want wealth, you face the north. We all know you have to face Har Bayit. And when you're in Yerushalayim, you're facing Har Bayit. When you're in the world, you're facing Yerushalayim. When you're on the Har Bayit, you're facing the Holy of Holies. It doesn't mean face south. What it means is, that's why there's halakhic aspects. In the temple courtyard, in the south, you had the menorah. By the way, that's why the custom is to put the menorah in the shul on the southern wall, or close to the south. Because in the courtyard, that's where the menorah is. And the menorah represents wisdom. Whereas the table, the shulchan, is in the north, and the table represents malchus, it represents wealth. Right? What else is the king supposed to do? He's supposed to make prosperity. He's supposed to make sure that everybody has two chickens in a pot and a two-car garage, I guess, whatever. And safety and security. Right? Parnasa, make sure everyone's doing okay. That's malchus. It's lechem, Beit Lechem, right? The Mashiach Dovid comes from Beit Lechem. And we're talking about the shulchan of breads. So that represents wealth. So if you just move yourself a little bit, you still face the direction. Look, we're in the south of Jerusalem, so we face north. But if I want wisdom, I should face 2 centimeters, 2 millimeters, whatever, to the right, which is Yamin. Yamin is south, right? We're going to see that also. If I want wealth, I face my left hand. I go a little bit to the left. But I don't turn my whole body around. I just move just a short little bit. Okay, so we're starting to discuss La'orech Yamim. Chazal tell us, Haroitze Lahachim Yidrom, that if you're interested in wisdom, you park yourself a little bit to the south. Ulachachma Remez La'orech Yamim. And the idea of wisdom anyway hints to a long life. How do we know that? Look in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 12. That's number 11 on the source sheet. No. It's past there. It's number 13 on the source sheet. Whoever is in the shade of wisdom is in the shade of money. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to its possessor. So knowledge causes, yes, it causes wealth, but the main point is that it causes a long life. That's the thesis he wants to show you. That, right, v'yitron da'as ha'chachma techia ba'aleha. Right, the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to its possessor. Look at Rashi real quick. What does it mean? And moreover, wisdom has an advantage over money, insofar as wisdom gives life to its possessor. So the Gemara actually said in Gemara Baba Basra 25b that even though if you want wisdom, you point a little bit to the right. If you want wealth, you point a little bit to the left. It concludes like King Solomon did. You get both if you go to the right. Because if you're smart enough, it'll help you get money. Right? That could be why the Jews are quite creative and industrious. Not all of us, but we help each other, right? Okay. So the Yakar says like this. L'hachnim ramaz l'orach yamim. Like the pasuk we just said. Ksiv, it also says in Job, chapter 12, verse 12, in number 14, in elders there is wisdom, and in longevity there is understanding. In other words, orech yamim tivuna, there's an equation with wisdom and long life. Okay? I mean, it's really obvious. The older you are, the more you gain wisdom. I say obvious. It's not so obvious, but that's really the goal here. That every day we learn something new, right? And we're smarter than we were yesterday. That is hopefully where we're all at. Unfortunately, we're not, but we try. And you stand up for an older person because the assumption is they have a lot of wisdom. Now he says, "V'af arichat yamim haya Shlomo miganeh." Now, even though we just talked about how great longevity is and it's wise, it's related to wisdom, King Solomon denigrated. He had a few verses that didn't speak highly about old age. For example, in Koheles chapter 4, verse 2, he says, "And I praise the dead who have already died." I mean, that's pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? That's pretty, pessimistic, right? V'shabeach ani es hamesim shkvar mesu. And not only that, he also said something very not nice about life, a long life. In Koheles, chapter 6, verse 6. We're going to refer back to this again. And if he had lived 1,000 years twice, can you imagine living 1,000 years? And if he lived twice, 2,000 years, and experienced no pleasure, do not all go to one place? It's like a rhetorical question, right? Vilu chaya elef shanim pa'amayim. Now, just keep in mind, v'toiva lo ra'ah. V'al dalad ruchos hashamayim ha'misovim dalad elu. We saw in Job already where it says specifically in 23:8, "Behold, I go to the east, and he is not here. Hein kedem halech ve'einenu." The east we said are the children, and we see that all of Job's children died. and that's referring to the east. His children are no longer there. Then it says Vachor in the west, because what's the opposite? What's the back, going back from the east? The west. Lo avin lo. I didn't understand. That is referring to, I perceive him not, that's going to the opposite of wisdom, right? It's referring to wisdom, which comes from the west, that he's lacking that. If you go now to the following verse, 23:9, then we're going to the north. So we did the east and the west. Now in the north, when he made it, I do not see. So in Hebrew, when it says north, it says small. It doesn't use the word saphon. It says left. What did we already establish? That the left, we're always facing east. The left is the north. It says, ba'asato v'lo achaz. Now the word achaz could mean to grasp, but it also means to see. And here it's translated as to see. Rashi actually points out where the accent is. It's under the aleph. The very fact it's under the aleph, that means it's seeing. Whereas if the accent was under the chet, then it would mean grasping. That's what Rashi says. Okay, so in the north, when he made it, I do not see. And what do we say the north was? The north was wealth. So he lost all his wealth. He wraps up the south, I cannot see. So also, what's in the south? That's, we said, is a long life. And he's of lo ereh. So when it says he wraps it up, it's Yatof Yamin. He's referring to the south. He's wrapping up the south, and also I cannot see. Interestingly enough, what does the Yakar say here? He says, it's 3 lines down, Lefi shemikedem bozera, starting with the beginning of the verse, where the east, that's where the seed come from. Kvar haya kol zera iyuv kala. All of Job's children had died. Vachor, the back, hu ramaz l'chachma. That's west. Whatever is behind the east. That it says lo avin lo. He didn't understand. He wasn't able to comprehend it. Ella asig oimechach shalo asig oimechach. He wasn't able to grasp the depth of what was going on. But it says small basoto. In the left, he did it v'lo achos, but he didn't see it. Meaning to say, shim esa ha'oisher habo min hasmol. That even if I created the wealth, which comes from the left, which we said is the north, lo achaz. I think here it means not only did he not see it, he also didn't grab it, because it says she'enu mitachez im ha'adam. It's not grasped by the man; it slips through your fingers. As the next verse in Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 11 says. Look at that; it's amazing. Number 19, the cuckoo calls, but it has not laid. So it is he who gathers riches, but not b'mishpat, but not doing it correctly. So maybe in Hebrew, Osei Osher, he made wealth, v'lo b'mishpat, but he didn't do it with justice. He did it against the law, not by right. What's going to happen? He's going to leave them in the midst of his days, right? B'chetzi yamav yazvenu. So we're really talking about, on a certain level, the wealth is not going to last. And then Yatoth Yamin, he wrapped himself to the right. Well, Dahainu Lorach Yamin Biyamina. This refers us back to the long life which comes from the right. Okay, and just as an example, we should know what I mentioned to you already, what it says in Job 23:9. Right, he wraps up the south, and I cannot see. V'lo ereh. That means I will not see. Al derek shneimar, just like it says in Koheles, chapter 6, verse 6, which you already saw in note 16, where if I would have had 1,000 years twice, and I still wouldn't be, I still wouldn't see it. I still wouldn't have all this benefit. No pleasure. So if you turn the page, v'toy v'lo ra, even the good stuff, the pleasure I never experienced. And that's what it means, lo ereh. I wouldn't see it. The very same word, verbiage that's used in Job 23:9. Meaning to say, kolomer, shetoiva lo ereh v'im kein lama, im kein moli harichas yamim. This was the disparaging moment of Shlomo saying, What's the point? If I'm not going to get pleasure, then why do I need a long life? Now, he says, Kedei lahatzil et ha'adam midalid mikari melu, in order to save a person from these circumstances, these events, right? We don't want to end up like Job, right? For a person to end up saved in terms of the right choices, the right things happening with these four major ideas, which are, as we said, they are wealth, their children, their wisdom, and of course, a long life. And that's what he says right here. They affect you from the four different winds, the four different directions of the world. Al banav, children. Al yamav, long life. The al mamono, wealth and money. The al hachmato, and for the person's wisdom. All these four things are going to be affected. You're going to be affected by. What did God do? Nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael HaTorah. That God gave us the Torah. Shavem Yisrael Yoitzim Lecherus. That the Jewish people go out towards freedom. Let freedom ring. Mikol Dalid Mikarim. You are free from these, from being affected in negatively by these four things. Since it says in the Torah, in Mishlei chapter 3 verse 15 or 16? It's 16. Look at number 21. It says, Oirech Yamim Biyamina Bismola Oishav Kavod. Length of days is in its right hand, it's referring to the Torah, and its left hand are riches and honor. Let's look at Rashi. Those who make the right use of their life and engage in it, or even riches, and engage in it for its own sake, will have length of days and surely riches and honor. But those who make the wrong use, which is the left side, who engage in it not for its own sake, will still have riches and honor, but not length of days. Okay, so what do we see here? The Yakar is mentioning this for a reason, because the Torah itself is referring to the length of days is to its right, and to its left is wealth and honor. So you have within the Torah both. You have both. You have long days and wealth and honor. And what about students? Meaning if you're already learning Torah and teaching Torah, it means you have students. And the students are kabanim, are like children. So that also comes through the Torah. And also Chazal say, Ziknei Talmidei Chachamim kol zman shemaziknin mosifim chachma. Length of days. As long as a Talmid Chacham, it's like an old, what do you call it? Like an old bottle of wine, right? The older it gets, the richer it gets, meaning in wisdom. It's going to have a wealthier taste, right? It's going to have more punch, whatever right? So the older the wise person gets, the more wisdom is acquired and given to him. So what do we see? Hooray, Shadal Elu Boim Mitzad Torah, that you have these four things are coming from the Torah itself. Haboyim Mitzad Torah ain't a mekablim tamor v'hefsid. And when you're doing it correctly through the Torah, there is no bad exchange that can happen where there could be a loss. Nimsa Shvatorah hu yoytze lecheros min hamikarim chalufi midal ruchas olam. And that it comes out that from within the Torah, what's going to come out, what's going to result is true freedom from those events. From those events, they're going to chalufim, that are going to pass through you through these four different directions. And that's what it means in Exodus chapter 32, verse 16. It's number 23 in the source sheet. We spoke about this. Charut, to engrave on the luchos. So look in Rashi, charut is the same as charot, with the taf and the tet are interchangeable, the same. That's an expression of engraving. But he mentions here in Gemara Eruvin 54a, which I'm sorry I didn't copy it down, but basically it's famous Lezeh Isa Barati Parsha Shoftim. Oh, I skipped something. Al tikrei charut ela cherut. Don't read it only as strictly engraving, but understand that through the law, this is a big, I don't know how the Christians get it so wrong, but okay, that it's through the law you find your freedom. We're not bound that we don't find freedom, that we actually find the freedom. In fact, anybody who's married testify to this, huh?
It's the first dibel. It's the first dibel. It doesn't say Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It says Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzaticha Meretz Mitzrayim.
Yeah.
Your freedom is owed to God.
Yeah. So the first command, we'll call it a command. It doesn't even look like one. It's out of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. But who is God? He's the one who he's your Savior. He is the one who produces freedom. He took you out of Egypt. Right? That's why the Christians have left that out. They have a different 10 commandments than we do. They split the second one into 2, because you need 10, of course. How can they have, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt? They weren't there, we were there. So they kind of skipped that. But it doesn't sound like it's a command. It sounds like a statement of fact. We hold, not everybody, but we hold that it's basically the first of the 10 commandments. So God is the one, that's why we have this whole idea of Mashiach, the whole idea of we're optimistic about the future, that Hashem will save us. We have been saved. In other words, we have been saved, we will be saved again. He promised us. Okay, so the last thing we mentioned was the word cherut, freedom. Oh, I wanted to mention also, when you add ink to paper, so it's on the paper, and it could be scratched off, whatever it is. I mentioned married men especially know what it's like. Borders actually create freedom, right? What they say about good neighbors. Fences create good neighbors. So within a relationship, the wife especially creates the borders for the man. It's just a fact, right? And this is where he will find actually his own growth and his own freedom by accepting these borders. I mean, there's some sexual connotations as well regarding borders and constriction. But put it like this. When you engrave, you're creating borders. In other words, you're etching it out and you actually have borders. As opposed to just putting ink, it can go anywhere. Okay, so it had to be engraved in order that we would be restricted, and through following the law, doing what's right, we collectively, we will find our freedom, individually as well. Okay, so then he says, this is brought down in the Rabbi team, Parashat Shoftim, which I couldn't find. What does it say? Now this is a little bit, he takes this verse and he breaks it down. And he breaks it down in a way that I never would have thought. But apparently there's a source for this. Okay, Pera Limud Midbar Ba'ot Nafsho She'efa Ruach. Look in Jeremiah 2, verse 24. Am I correct? Yeah. It's really crazy because he's telling you this wild donkey is accustomed to the desert. Now that's going to be the Jewish people. In the good way. That snuffs up the wind in her desire, that's going to be like kind of not the good way. So why would the wild donkey be the good where snuffing up the wind in her desire, it seems to be not the right way? Let's look at the Yakar and how he starts to explain it. He takes the verse. He says, Imre Rabbanan, the Chachamim said, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu to Yisrael, that God said to the Jewish people, Ani Amarti, God wants us to be free from exile. He wants us to be. And that's what it means. Pera limud midbar, this wild ass, this wild donkey, is accustomed to the wilderness. Kepera hazeh, like this wild donkey, sheina mityare mishum bria. You know, we've been called a lot of things. Stiff-necked, especially by God. We're stiff-necked. You know that the stiff-necked is the reason we were chosen, because he knew we weren't going to just fall for any Tom, Dick, and Harry, missionary, other religions. We were going to stick this through thick and thin. And so being thick, stiff-necked can be a good thing. So too here, this wild ass is not afraid of anyone. There's nobody who's going to cause any fear. Aval, but when it comes to aten ba'avod nafshechem she'afeitam ruach, that latter part, well, it snuffs up the wind in her desire. Ein ruach el galut. This idea of ruach, this idea of directions or the spirit of the wind, that's referring to the exile. It happens to mention in Daniel chapter 7 verse 2. Daniel raised his voice and said, I saw in my vision during the night, behold, the four winds. Does that sound familiar? The four winds of the heavens were stirring up the great sea. Okay? In Hebrew, Va'aru arba ruchai shemaya megichan liyama rabba. And the Midrash means to say, the Yakar says, Ratza Midrash zeh. What's the Midrash want to, what message does it want to convey? Shekadosh Baruch Hu oimel Yisrael. That God is speaking to us. Ani amarti pera limud midbar. I'm the one who said that this wild ass, this wild donkey, is accustomed to the desert. What happened in the desert? Shetaltalti eschem b'midbar. God took us, He carried us, He moved us around in the desert. B'makom heferam, in a wild place. Kedei, why did He bring us through such a wilderness? Kedei shetilmadu mehem derech eretz, in order that we should learn some kind of conduct or behavior that's more proper. Okay? Like it says in Job chapter 6, verse 5, which is number 28. Does a wild donkey bray when it has grassed? Hayinhak pera ele desha? What does that mean? While the donkey is eating, he's not braying, whatever, making all kinds of screaming, obnoxious noises. He's eating. And you know what he has? He's got his food in front of him. And he's not worried about tomorrow. He's not worried about 5 minutes from now. The only thing, he has his food with him. Okay? And that's what that verse means. Look at the top line. Sha'pera hazeh bizman sheyesh lo lecho. That this wild donkey at the time, he actually has what to eat. As enu tzoek al ma sheyachol lemachar. He's not at all concerned. He's not making any noise. He's not braying, screaming about the future. Because he has no concern about anybody taking away his food. That might take by force whatever his parnas, his welfare, his food. He knows that his nourishment, his food, is always in front of him. And that's like the Jewish people. V'uremez liYisrael, this actually hints to the Jewish people. She'achaziku b'toyos Hashem. It's talking about the Jewish people who have a strong grasp on the Torah of God. Kikachu darcha pas b'melech. We learn this is the way of the Torah, is to eat little, right? Don't eat extravagantly. Just have a simple pita bread with some salt. That's what you should eat. V'shelo yatriach acher asifat hakinyanim. Don't spend your life working so hard to make collectibles, to just acquire things. Rak yasok b'toras Hashem. All you need to do is involve yourself with the Torah of God. The al Hashem yashlik yahavo. And then God sends His love. Hashem will send what you need. He sends His love. We all need love. All you need is love. V'hu yikakalu, and He will support you. V'az you chorin, then you're really free. Then you're chorin mikre hazman haboim misibat hayetzara hanikra zaken ksil. You're really free from the happenstances of time, or that happens at times, that come because of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is called the old and foolish person. We have a verse in Koheles chapter 4, verse 13. Is it on the sheet somewhere? Yeah. Look in number 29. Right? Better a poor and wise child. Rashi says that's the good inclination. It's called a child because it's younger than the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara comes when you're born, right? It's 12 or 13 years older, right? Well, what does it say about the poor, old, foolish one? I'm sorry. But better a poor and wise child. That, Rashi says, he's called poor, the Yetzer Tov, because the limbs don't obey it. They don't obey the evil inclination. Wise, because it gives a person intelligence to follow the right way. What about the old and foolish king? This is the evil inclination which rules over all the limbs. And when the child's born, that's when it enters. So it's the older. And what is it foolish? It misleads him in the way of evil. Okay. Going back into the Yakar, so he says, Zaken uksil, right? Sivas avon nikra ol. This is very interesting because the word ol in Hebrew, without the vowels, it looks like the word avel. Avel means evil. But we're going to play back and forth. It could mean evil. But here I think it means like the yoke. It's a burden or devoted, right? It's a yoke. The reason that the sin itself is called a yoke, and that's what it means in Eicha. Eicha is Lamentations chapter 1 verse 14, right? That's number 30. The yoke of my transgression, the word niskad, is like devotion, right? That's the yoke of my sin has marked his hand. So we see that sin is called a yoke. It says in Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, Mishnah 5, Kol hanoisein alav ol Torah, anyone that places on their shoulder, so to speak, the yoke of Torah, Poirek mimenu ol galut, is removed from him the yoke, the burden of exile. And like we said before, Shepark mimenu ol ha'avon haba mesivas ha'yetzer hara nikra zaken. That when you remove from yourself the yoke of the sin that's coming because of the Yetzer Hara, which we said was the older one, the Zaken, because kihi mechate es ha'adam, that is what causes the person to sin. U'masir mimenu midas habitachon, and it removes from you, the person, all aspects of the character trait of bitachon, of trust in God. Umare lo derech muchal, and it shows the person the crooked path. Ba'asifat kinyanim, and what's the crooked path? Just acquiring things. You want to just keep acquiring things in this world. Bechushvam kihemikar, because it convinces you that's the prime purpose of life, to keep acquiring things. Things. And it's Black Friday, and you go online, and it's so easy. They deliver to your door. And it's cheap. But just try to buy only the things you really need that you could use for mitzvahs. Otherwise, it's just a waste. Anyway, so he says, Bezeh gorem lo sheyeh mishuba tachas ol mikre azman. And if you go in that direction where you're just acquiring things, what are you doing? You are basically, it's causing you to be subjected underneath the yoke of events that occur in time. You're now prone, you're vulnerable. I think it also can be Mikrei Hazman. It could mean not just the events that occur in time, but to time itself. Because we talk about length of days and being like 1 foot in Olam Haba. We're Yud Kei Vav Kei with the Daled. We really have an eternal existence, but you're somehow, you're Bazman Hazeh, you're really, entering this world like that's the Ikar. Lefikach, Shama Kadosh Baruch Hu Bamidbar. That's why God put us into the desert. Sheyiladu Derech Eretz, that we should actually learn a proper character trait from this wild ass. Min Hatharim Kinizkar, like this wild donkey, Shifrakum Aleim Ol Hayetzer Hara, the Ol Havon, the Ol Mikre Azman. In other words, we have total trust. We know we have what we need now. Everything that we need, we have right now. And we're getting rid of the yoke of the Yetzer Hara and the yoke of sin and the yoke of being, the events that will occur in time as well. Avatem ba'avot nafshechem liyotchem luhutim. But you, the Jewish people, at times, right? You individuals, your souls have this desire, and they get all lit up. Luhut is like a flame. Acher hatavos, you're chasing your desires. Lefikach parachtem alechem ol Torah. You know why? Because you remove from yourself the yoke of Torah. And what did you do instead? Leilech akre mare nechem. You chase after what you saw with your eyes. Asher im zona macharehem. Right? When you prostituted after your eyes. You were seduced after your eyes. Lefikach. Therefore, sha'afatem ruach. That's why you had these desires. And those desires are remez lemikreas man. Back to the idea where you are now subjected to the events that happen in this world. Chalufi malech, and they're going to come upon you. It says in Psalms 35:5, look at number 32, let them be as chaff before the wind. Yeh kamotz lifnei ruach. Let them be as chaff before the wind. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. And also another verse. Where's the other one? It's also in Psalms 1:4. Not so the wicked, but they are like chaff that the wind drives away. Also, kim kamotz asher tifenu ruach. Okay, remember, it's always going back to that ruach. There's an exchange, and you have to make that choice. And that's why he says here that this is a hint. There's going to be this constant struggle. There's going to be a constant turmoil with the winds of this world, and that's what it means. Ein ruach el galut. We're in galus for 2,000 years, but listen, the Jewish people for most of our history has been in galut, right? We had maybe 800 years. We had, let's just see this. The first, right? We had the first temple was 400 plus, and before that we had 400. That was 800, and then the second temple appeared another 400 plus. So you're talking about 1,200 years out of 3,300 years of history. Most of the time has been galut. The Arodalad Rucha Shemaya Magichim Liyami Rabba. And when Daniel said that I saw the four winds that from heaven that were stirring up the great sea, that hints Shemolichim Aleim Adalad Ruchos. This is the idea that these four directions are going to come. Ki apoirek me'alav ol Torah, and anybody that uproots and takes off the yoke of Torah, harehu mishuba takteim, he is going to be underneath, subjected to those negative exchanges. Aval hanoisen alav ol Torah harei ben chorin kanizkar, then for sure, right? He places upon himself the yoke of Torah. He is considered really, truly free. And let me just sum up. We'll stop here, but I'll just sum up the next paragraph a little bit. And it's so interesting because he leaves from Beer Sheva, right? Why did we say it needed to tell us that he left from Beer Sheva? If you look at number 34, in Megillah 17a, it says before he left, he wanted to learn from Shem and Aver what it meant to go into Galut. How is he going to survive? What character traits does he need to survive in Galut? He learned Torah, and that Torah that he learned is why it says he left from Beer Sheva, because that's where the yeshiva of Shem and Aver was. Okay, so that's one idea. What about, so the name Sheva also? Sheva, do you know that there's 5 books of Moses? We all know there's 5 books of Moses. But really what? There's 7 books of Moses. How do we know there's 7 books of Moses? Listen to this. When we went up from Egypt, it says, Chamushim alu. We went up armed. The Chazal tells us he went up 1/5. Because chamush can also mean 1/5. You all know Givat HaTachmoshet. It's chamush means armed, ammunition. Listen to this. Rashi right there says, what does it mean they went up armed? Klei Zion. What's Klei Zion? Another term for ammunition. What's Zion? 7. They went up willing to take the 7 books of the Torah. What are the 7 books? In Numbers. In Numbers, there's these 2 inverted upside down nuns. And in between there's these verses, right? When we go out to war, we bring the Aron Kodesh with us. And when we come back, it rests. That's another book. So you have Genesis, Exodus, that's 2 books. Vayikra, Leviticus is the 3rd book. Within Numbers, you have 3 books. They're called 3 distinct books. Before the nun, between the 2 nuns, and then after the 2nd nun. So that's 3, that's already 6, and then you have Deuteronomy. 7 books. So look in Proverbs 9:1, number 36. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. What are the 7 pillars? Look at Rashi. This refers to the books of the Torah. In Numbers, look it up, chapter 10, verse 35. You're going to see. And it came out when the ark would travel. Has these inverted upside down nuns. That is a 7th book. It's an individual book. So we have, he went to Beersheba, he was in Beersheba. He left Beersheba, meaning he went to the yeshiva before he went to Gullus. And what does it mean? He went to Haran, Harana, Beit Chorin. He became a free person. When he went to exile, when the Jew is full of Torah and is forced down to exile, he will be protected. He will be protected from these 4 winds. As we started by saying, God promised Yaakov that even you're going to be strengthened. You're going to be strengthened. You're going to be strengthened in the north, east, south, and west. Wherever you go, I'm with you. Now it's time to come home. Now it's time to come home, right? The Gullus is, what would we say it is? It's a ticking time bomb. It's almost over. It looks like all the signs are telling us it's over. Hopefully we'll all read the signs, buy our tickets. You can go by boat, you can come by plane, you can come by walking. I don't know. We're here, we need you. We want you. Anyway, let's just say this is an interesting idea on this week's Parsha. Thank God for the Yakar. And I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Gesundte winter. And I keep saying this, it should rain in the right place, at the right time, in the right amount. And you know what I mean. B'ezrat Hashem, and have a good life. And we'll see you next week.